They told us that freedom would make us happy, that if we could choose anything, do anything, and be anything, we would finally feel complete. Yet today, in the heart of the modern world, where freedom is worshipped like a god, people feel more lost than ever before. The West has built a culture that celebrates freedom of choice, but forgets to ask freedom for what? We are told that liberation means breaking every boundary. But when boundaries disappear, so does direction. Humanity now drifts in a sea of endless choices, chasing pleasure without peace, movement without meaning. The irony is that in trying to be free from everything, people have become enslaved to their desires, to trends, to the opinions of others. The more the world screams, be free, the more it feels trapped in anxiety, loneliness, and confusion. That is because the human soul was never created to be directionless. It was designed with a purpose to know its creator, to serve something higher than itself, and to live with meaning that transcends time. Without that purpose, freedom becomes emptiness dressed in glamour. You can have the ability to do whatever you want, but if you don't know why you're doing it, you will never find peace. Islam comes not to restrict freedom, but to redefine it. It teaches that freedom without purpose is like a ship without a compass. It may float, but it will never reach a destination. Islam gives the soul what the world has taken away direction. It tells us that true liberation is not found in doing whatever we want, but in doing what we were created for. It is not about serving the self, but serving the one who gave us the self. The Quran says, "I did not create jinn and mankind except to worship me." This verse is not a limitation, it is liberation. It reminds us that our worth does not depend on worldly measures, beauty, wealth, or success, but on how deeply we align our hearts with Allah's guidance. The West teaches that the self is supreme, but Islam teaches that peace begins when the self bows before its creator. It frees you from the exhausting pressure of trying to be your own God, because when you make your desires your master, you are no longer free, you are chained to your own impulses. But when you make Allah your master, you are set free from everything else. Submission in Islam is not weakness, it is strength. It is saying, I don't need to control everything because I trust the one who controls all things. That is real freedom. The tragedy of modern society is that it has mistaken rebellion for empowerment. It has confused the breaking of rules with the discovery of truth, but truth is not found in defiance. It is found in alignment with the natural order Allah has placed in the universe. The sun rises and sets in obedience to its Lord. The oceans stay within their limits because they were commanded to. The entire creation functions in submission, and that is why it exists in harmony. Only the human being who was given free will breaks this harmony when he disconnects from his purpose. Islam restores this balance. It teaches that freedom and purpose are not enemies, they are partners. Freedom gives you choice, and purpose gives that choice meaning. Islam does not erase individuality. It elevates it. It tells you that your talents, your intellect, and your life have meaning beyond worldly validation. It calls you not to abandon the world, but to live in it with consciousness, to seek knowledge, serve others, and walk with humility. It teaches that success is not in doing what you please, but in pleasing the one who knows what is best for you. That is why when the heart finds Allah, it finds peace, because it is finally free from the burden of pleasing everyone else. So while the West preaches freedom, Islam teaches purpose. And purpose is the deeper form of freedom, the kind that no power can take away, the kind that makes you whole even in hardship, because you know your life is not an accident. Islam does not enslave you to rules, it awakens you to meaning. It reminds you that freedom is not running away from limits, but running toward truth. When the soul understands this, it no longer needs to escape. It begins to return. It returns to the one who gave it life, the one who placed peace and submission and honor in servitude. That is the beauty of Islam. It does not just free the body from chains, it frees the heart from confusion. And when the heart is free, everything else follows. The world may call this submission, but the soul calls it peace. Because in bowing down to Allah, you rise above everything else. They call it freedom, the freedom to choose to live, to love, to define your own truth. Yet beneath that glittering slogan lies a deep emptiness that the modern world cannot seem to fill. Humanity has been told that liberation is found in doing whatever pleases the self. That meaning comes from unchaining oneself from tradition, morality, and God. This illusion of freedom has enslaved the soul in far more subtle ways. In the name of choice, we have become captives of desire. In the name of progress, we have abandoned peace. The Western narrative of freedom celebrates the ego as the ultimate authority, teaching people that submission is weakness and dependence is a flaw. Yet Islam teaches something profoundly different, that true freedom is not found in rebellion against divine law, but in harmony with it. It teaches that purpose is not self-created, but divinely gifted, and that every human heart was designed with a creator-shaped void. Modern civilization has built skyscrapers, but torn down inner stability. It has advanced technology, but regressed in morality. It has achieved luxury, but lost serenity. The Western ideal tells us, be your own God, while Islam whispers with grace, know your Lord. And thereon lies the difference between freedom and purpose, between wandering aimlessly and walking toward meaning. Because when freedom becomes the end goal, it turns into chaos. A society that worships freedom above truth loses its moral compass. It begins to glorify desires that harm the soul and normalize sins that poison the spirit. People begin to confuse pleasure with happiness, attention with love, and rebellion with empowerment. They chase more money, more validation, more experiences, but deep down there is a void that no achievement seems to fill. The reason is simple: the human being was not created for endless freedom, but for meaningful submission. A heart disconnected from its creator will always remain restless. No matter how much the world applauds it, Islam doesn't suppress freedom, it refines it. It doesn't cage the human spirit, it directs it toward peace. In the Islamic worldview, freedom is not the right to do whatever one wishes, but the strength to do what is right even when one wishes otherwise. Purpose is what gives boundaries meaning. It transforms rules into protection and limits into love. When a believer submits to Allah, they are not losing control, they are finally letting go of what was never in their control to begin with. This surrender is not oppression. It is liberation from the slavery of the self, from the dictatorship of fleeting desires, from the noise of a world that shouts, follow your heart, while forgetting that an unhealed heart can lead astray. Islam's purpose-centered life anchors the soul in certainty amid confusion. It defines honor not by how loud we assert ourselves, but by how deeply we know our Creator. In a world drowning in opinions, Islam offers truth. In a world obsessed with self, Islam calls to transcendence. It reminds us that we were created not to serve the ego, to serve something infinitely higher. Allah, the source of all peace, justice, and meaning. The West may preach freedom, but without divine direction, that freedom becomes a marriage, a promise that glitters, but never quenches the thirst of the soul. True freedom is not found in walking away from God, but in walking back to Him. The modern idea of freedom, as celebrated in the Western world, has promised humanity liberation, but delivered confusion. It tells us that to be free means to obey no one, to submit to no rule, to follow only our own will, yet this pursuit of self has become the very cause of emptiness and despair. People are told that happiness comes from doing whatever pleases them, from defining their own truths, and from rejecting anything that limits their desires. But what happens when every person becomes their own God? When truth becomes relative, morality becomes negotiable, and desire becomes the highest authority. The result is a society that cannot distinguish right from wrong, a culture that glorifies sin as self-expression, and a generation that is spiritually exhausted despite having everything materially. The human soul was not created to drift without guidance. It was designed to live by divine wisdom. This is why Islam's message feels like a breath of fresh air in a suffocating world. It reminds us that life is not about chasing pleasure, but about fulfilling purpose. It invites us to a deeper kind of freedom, the freedom from being enslaved by our own whims. Because when you live without boundaries, you don't become free, you become lost. You move from one desire to another, one relationship to the next, one achievement to another, and still you feel empty. Islam gives structure to freedom. It brings harmony between body and soul, between intellect and emotion, between rights and responsibilities. It does not silence individuality, it sanctifies it by connecting it to something greater than itself. When you live for Allah, you are no longer defined by social trends, validation, or material gain. You become grounded in something unchanging and eternal. The world teaches you to find yourself. Islam teaches you to find your Creator, because only in knowing Him do you truly know yourself. Freedom without faith is like a ship without a compass. It drifts endlessly until it breaks against the rocks of confusion. But when faith anchors that ship, every storm becomes navigable, every wave becomes meaningful, and every journey leads home. The Western model of freedom has tried to build heaven on earth by removing God from the equation. Yet it has ended up creating a world where people have everything to live with, but nothing to live for. Depression, loneliness, and anxiety rise not because humanity lacks comfort, but because it lacks connection to the one who created comfort itself. Islam answers this crisis by redefining what it means to be free. It teaches that true freedom is not in rejecting divine authority, but in embracing it, for it is only through surrendering to Allah that the heart finds peace. Submission in Islam is not humiliation. It is alignment. It is returning to the natural state of the soul, the fitra that longs to worship, to belong, and to love in a way that transcends the temporary. The West seeks liberation through rebellion. Islam offers liberation through remembrance. One leads to endless hunger, the other to eternal contentment. The irony is that the very freedom that was meant to fulfill the human heart has become the chain that suffocates it. But Islam breaks those chains, not by denying freedom, by giving it purpose. It reminds us that the soul cannot breathe in the suffocating atmosphere of self-worship. It was made to breathe in the light of divine truth. When freedom is guided by revelation, it becomes peace. When it is detached from God, it becomes chaos. The West preaches freedom as the highest goal. Islam teaches that freedom is not the goal, it is the means. The goal is purpose, peace, and proximity to the one who made us. Because only when we live for something greater than ourselves do we truly begin to live. The illusion of freedom in the modern Western world has created a paradox. People are freer than ever before, yet more lost than they have ever been. They can speak what they want, wear what they want, love who they want, and live how they want. But deep within there is a restlessness that no liberty can silence. It is the ache of the soul that has everything but meaning. This is the tragedy of a civilization that has confused liberation with disconnection from God. It tells people that submission is oppression, that religion is a prison, and that morality is outdated. The reality is that a life without divine purpose is a life without peace. When the Creator is removed from the center of existence, the creation begins to collapse under the weight of its own confusion. We see it in the rise of mental health crises, the epidemic of loneliness, and the obsession with identity, everyone searching for who they are, but no one asking who made them. The more people try to define themselves apart from God, the more fractured their sense of self becomes. This is because the human being was never meant to carry the burden of defining absolute truth. It is too heavy for a soul that was designed to submit, not to rule. Islam comes as a mercy to this confusion. It brings back balance by reuniting freedom with responsibility, individuality with humility, and intellect with revelation. It teaches that the purpose of freedom is not to glorify the self, but to serve the truth. When you surrender to Allah, you do not lose yourself, you find yourself. You discover a peace that does not depend on the world's approval and a strength that does not crumble under its rejection. Islam dignifies the human being by placing him in his rightful place, not as a god, but as a servant of the one true God. And this servitude is not slavery. It is the highest form of freedom because it releases the heart from every false master, from society, from trends, from ego, from the endless chase for validation. In this world, the word freedom has been used to justify almost anything: the breaking of families, the rejection of modesty, the distortion of morality. But what kind of freedom leads to emptiness, regret, and despair? True freedom cannot harm the soul. It cannot destroy what is sacred. The Islamic understanding of freedom is therefore not about doing everything you want, but about doing what you were created for. When Allah commands, it is not to restrict joy, but to protect it. His guidance is not a limitation, but a lifeline. It shields the believer from drowning in a sea of endless desires, reminding them that not every urge deserves to be followed, and not every emotion should become a god. The Western world glorifies the phrase, follow your heart, but Islam teaches that the heart needs purification before it can lead. For a heart that has not known its creator is easily deceived by its desires. The pursuit of freedom without moral clarity turns into an escape from responsibility and eventually from reality itself. But Islam's purpose-centered vision restores that clarity. It shows that the soul's deepest need is not self-expression, divine connection. It teaches that peace is not found in doing what feels good, but in doing what is right. And what is right is not defined by human opinion, but by divine revelation. This is why every act of worship in Islam, prayer, fasting, charity, is a reminder that you were never meant to live disconnected from your creator. It disciplines the soul to seek balance, to align freedom with faith, and to remember that without God, every freedom turns into a prison of the self. Islam liberates by reminding us that true strength lies not in rebellion, but in obedience, not in claiming independence from God, but in returning to Him. When you look at the modern West, you see people chasing an ideal that keeps slipping further away. They want peace, but reject the very source of peace. They want meaning, but deny the existence of the one who gives meaning. They build systems, laws, and ideologies in search of justice, yet injustice grows. They invent philosophies to explain happiness, yet depression rises. They replace God with materialism. And the result is a culture that has everything but the one thing it needs, the remembrance of Allah. This is why Islam continues to rise, even in the very lands that claim to have outgrown religion, because truth has a way of speaking to the soul, even when the mind resists. Deep down, every human being longs for purpose, not temporary pleasure, not worldly validation, but something that lasts beyond the grave. And Islam offers exactly that, a vision of life that is coherent, compassionate, and complete. It gives the heart a direction and the mind a foundation. It answers the questions that freedom cannot. Who am I? Why am I here? What happens after this? The West preaches freedom as the ultimate success. Islam teaches that freedom without purpose is failure disguised as progress. To live freely without knowing why you live is not freedom at all. It is wandering. The real victory is to live consciously, meaningfully, and faithfully, knowing that every breath has a purpose and every action is seen by the one who created you. In the end, the world will come to realize that freedom may make the body feel powerful, but only purpose makes the soul truly alive. The Western pursuit of freedom has been glorified as the highest achievement of modern civilization, yet beneath its surface lies a crisis that cannot be denied. It is a crisis of meaning, of identity, and of the human soul. People have been told that they can define everything: truth, morality, love, and even themselves, and yet, in this limitless world, they feel more trapped than ever. The promise of freedom was supposed to bring happiness, but instead, it has left people isolated, anxious, and spiritually starved. They can now live however they want, but they no longer know why they live. This is the tragedy of a world that has replaced God with the self. When the ego becomes the master, peace disappears. When truth becomes relative, justice collapses. When the heart forgets its creator, it begins to worship creation. The West teaches that freedom means autonomy from divine command. Islam teaches that freedom is alignment with divine purpose. Islam restores to humanity what it has lost: direction, meaning, and peace. It reminds us that true freedom is not in defying the Creator, but in returning to Him. The human soul was not made to wander aimlessly. It was made to submit lovingly. When a person bows in prayer, they are not enslaving themselves. They are being released from every false master, every empty ideology, and every fleeting desire that once held them captive. That is why in Islam, submission is not a chain, it is the breaking of chains. It is the moment the heart finds stillness in a world that never stops running. The Western idea of freedom has tried to fill the emptiness of the heart with everything material: money, fame, pleasure, entertainment, but the soul was never designed to be satisfied by what is temporary. You can feed the body with wealth and comfort, but if the soul starves of remembrance, it will cry out through anxiety, depression, and restlessness. No amount of freedom can heal a heart that has forgotten its creator. And so, despite technological advancement and material comfort, there is a hollowness that echoes through modern life. Families are broken, relationships are shallow, and identity has become a question mark instead of an anchor. The more people are told they can be anything, the less they seem to know who they are. Islam answers this confusion not with restriction but with revelation. It gives clarity where the world gives contradiction. It says to the human being, you are not an accident, you are not meaningless, you are not here merely to chase pleasure. You were chosen by the Creator to live with purpose. And that purpose is not a burden but a gift. It gives life direction, defines morality, and nurtures the soul. When a person knows their purpose, even pain becomes meaningful. When they lose it, even pleasure becomes empty. This is why Islam's understanding of purpose is the ultimate freedom, because it frees the heart from the tyranny of desire, from the chaos of uncertainty, and from the illusion that the world alone can satisfy what was made for eternity. Modern society prides itself on progress, but what kind of progress leads to spiritual decay? What kind of liberation allows people to destroy themselves in the name of choice? True progress cannot exist without truth, and truth cannot exist without God. Islam redefines success by connecting it to the eternal rather than the temporary. It teaches that the real measure of freedom is not how much control we have over our lives, but how much peace we have within them. And peace can only be found through surrender, not surrender to man, but to the one who made man. In the Quran, Allah says, "Indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest." This is the essence of purpose. The heart was not created to worship freedom. It was created to worship Allah. When that remembrance returns, chaos fades. A woman who finds her worth in submission to Allah is freer than one who seeks validation from society's gaze. A man who humbles himself before his creator is stronger than one who builds his identity upon pride and rebellion. Because humility before God is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that the one who created the laws of existence knows better how to guide it than the creation ever could. When Islam calls to obedience, it is not to control but to protect. When it commands modesty, it is not to suppress beauty but to honor it. Every divine instruction carries mercy, and every restriction hides wisdom. The West may look at these boundaries and call them limitations. Islam sees them as the framework for peace, the very lines that preserve dignity, harmony, and love. As the world continues to chase freedom without direction, the human heart continues to cry out for meaning. This cry is being heard everywhere, in the burnout of professionals who have achieved everything yet feel nothing, in the loneliness of youth drowning in social media but starving for real connection, in the despair of those who try to escape their pain through distractions instead of devotion. And in the midst of this chaos, Islam rises, not as a new ideology, but as an ancient truth rediscovered. It calls the human being back to balance, back to their creator, back to themselves. It whispers that peace is not found in more freedom, but in deeper faith. It reminds us that the heart cannot be healed by what is created. It can only be healed by the creator. When the West preaches freedom, it focuses on the external, the body, the rights, the desires. But when Islam teaches purpose, it transforms the internal, the soul, the heart, the intention. That is why its message endures even when civilizations rise and fall. Because freedom changes with time, purpose is eternal. The one who finds purpose finds peace in every circumstance, in hardship and ease, in success and failure, in gain and loss. The world has taught us to be free, but Islam teaches us to be fulfilled. And fulfillment is not found in escaping God's guidance, but in walking humbly beneath it. The truest freedom is the one that leads you home, back to the one who created you, who sustains you, and who awaits you with mercy greater than all the freedom this world can offer.